Okay, man. Today's video, we are taking a look at Jeremie Frimpong. Obviously, we've looked at Zobo, we've looked at Florian Wirtz. I think this time, I think it makes sense to take a look at Jeremie Frimpong. He's definitely a player that I look at and I think to myself, don't really know what's going on with you. I don't. I'm not talking about your form. Um, that wouldn't even be too much of an issue because then you could attribute that to various other things. If I actually knew what your position was, what your role is in the team, obviously I can attribute that to the manager. But just in general, I have no idea. Is he a right winger? Was he supposed to be the backup right winger to Salah, but then the backup to Conor Bradley had he not got injured? Was he supposed to be the first teamer in terms of he's the starting right back, and then in some games he's the backup right winger? Maybe when if Salah gone to AFCON or anything like that, then he comes in to be the right winger for a period of time, and then that might have been the plan. Sometimes, what I mean, we don't always know. Do you get what I'm saying? And obviously, if things don't pan out in a certain kind of way, then it makes it more difficult to really understand. But I watch Frimpong and I just think to myself, I don't know what is it you're here to do. Liverpool lost Trent Alexander-Arnold. No problem if you're going to go sign a Frimpong. Again, he's a wing back, and he literally is a wing back. I don't think he's a right back. I don't think he's a right winger. He's literally a wing back. He has to sit right in that middle position, between the two, and he can kind of float almost between the two. And then, of course, depending on what the instructions, the responsibilities are, that's when you can really then determine what his effectiveness to the team and to the game is actually going to be. And we saw how that worked out by Leverkusen. There under Xabi Alonso, Grimaldo on the other side, Florian Wirtz obviously in the middle, Boniface up top. Like it worked. Stick all these guys like Xhaka, in the middle of the Palacios. Like it seemed to just work in that kind of system. Like I said, Liverpool have had a poor season, so of course it's going to exaggerate maybe a lot of these players and their form and things like that. But now Liverpool are going to have a new manager, coming in. I'm just trying to wonder, what does that look like for someone like Jeremie Frimpong? Like, where do we go with, a player of that kind of ability, if I'm being, 100% honest with you? And like I said, I feel like you just get more, I've got more questions than answers, when I do think about someone like him. This is obviously during his time at Bayer Leverkusen. And again, a common theme with this is that you're going to notice the areas that he's operating in, the positions he finds himself in, and also one of the main things for me as well is the positioning of the other players, because of course that's going to play a part in regards to where you're going to be and how you're going to affect the game in certain kind of instances. But you can see with some of these screenshots and stuff like that, you can always notice this is where I feel he was getting joy for Bayern Leverkusen. And that's not to say that he hasn't actually found himself in some of these positions actually for Liverpool, but I think the onus on him playing, with a back three behind you, you and Grimaldo, almost as I would left wing back, but you can almost say like a left midfielder, a right midfielder. I always felt that having that license and that kind of freedom to understand that I've still got three guys behind me. I've got my two central midfielders to obviously cover those wide areas just in case I go forward or the left back or left wing back, sorry, goes forward. I felt like there was a lot more. There was a lot more going there. Obviously, Liverpool's structure hasn't really been set, so that's obviously causing a massive kind of problem for him, in a general kind of sense. And I get that, but you can see here just with like the positioning anyway of Frimpong. Look at Bayern Leverkusen's back line. You got the three back there. You're good. Look who's you got another player cover those areas. These are the areas that he wants to operate in, because I know we talk about inverted right backs and inverted players and etc., but he can come infield. He can link up with a Florian Wirtz as an example, and I think that was probably it. Listen, I hope it doesn't go down that route, but it's starting to remind me a little bit of Ricky Lambert, Adam Lallana, where you bring them both in because they've had such a really good connection that you almost feel that they can't do without the other, or they can play a lot better with the other person, obviously there. And those two played absolutely magnificently, for Bayern Leverkusen. But I just think again, it's always going to be about the role obviously of the player himself, but then what are the other players doing? How are they going to then help in certain instances, whether it's from a defensive standpoint or an attacking standpoint, the movement of said players. Florian Wirtz, he drops in. Guess what? Frimpong's going on the outside again. Frimpong was finding himself in positions just like we see with Hakimi, where it's almost in that kind of, would I say, striker kind of area, more often than not, I would possibly say. And I think that helps for his kind of game. He is a forward for, and by the way, that's not a problem to me. That's not an issue, because that's what you are. That's what made you who you are. That's the reason, I guess, one of the reasons why Liverpool obviously would, go out there and sign you, especially because Liverpool then lose Trent Alexander-Arnold. You're thinking, if we're going to get someone like Frimpong, he's not a passer, he's not a necessarily a great dribbler or anything like that. What he is he's a threat in behind. So we need to get that threat closer to goal, which is what Bayern Leverkusen did with their system. And you can see here with Garcia and Xhaka, that's what they did. They were able to have that base to be able to do so. Now, as I mentioned before, Liverpool structure obviously hasn't actually been there. So you can see here, obviously, with the heat map, this is obviously his heat map from this season with Liverpool. And then you can see the heat map from Bayern Leverkusen. Obviously, as I said, he played, I guess it's two different positions, but you can see, yes, he's in that right back area. But again, someone who wants to get forward, get to that byline, get to the edge of, the opponent's box. But you can see here, I think he spends more. You can kind of see here, for me, he's in Liverpool. This is obviously the first. This is Liverpool. And I feel like in this Liverpool one, you can see obviously the right back area, no problem. And then obviously just over the halfway line, you can actually see the areas that he's obviously getting into. It's very, very similar until we get to the box. Because then you'll notice, we see with Bayer Leverkusen, there isn't that much of that. As you can see, there isn't that much of that. Obviously, yes, the right back area, but I'm just more talking, look from the halfway line onwards. Look at the kind of edge of the box and look at the differences. With Liverpool, it's it's bright red and everything like that. But with Bayern Leverkusen, it wasn't really about that. He would go on the outside quite a lot. But obviously with Liverpool, it's all about almost trying to cut in. And I just feel that that's kind of, would I say, kind of hampering his game, a little bit. If I'm being totally honest, you want to get him in these kind of areas here. And if the structure is right and everything is being done properly, obviously Liverpool lost this game, but I'm just looking at this specific screenshot in itself. When you do look at it, these are the kind of areas that Frimpong wants to be getting himself in, so he can do this. Liverpool didn't give him those opportunities enough, in my personal opinion, when he did play. Obviously, you could see it when he does play. Obviously, he's rapid. He's an absolutely fast individual. So I'm always trying to wonder as to what is it that you're trying to do, with someone, like a Frimpong. And obviously, you can see here, I've got him here right back and in the right wing kind of position. I always just feel like he's more looking to, let's say this is another winger. If he's playing in the right back position, he's someone who he wants to get he wants the ball into someone like a Gravenberch, so he can go and obviously do this, and then it's that kind of run, and he's running beyond. So what you then need is for your right winger. Now, obviously, his right winger was Salah. There were moments where they linked up pretty well, but Salah is obviously someone who kind of stays here as well. So what you used to always find, in my opinion, was, yes, the ball would get here, and these two can link up absolutely fine, but there's not much else going on. You've only got one striker, remember. He's not realistically going to find himself also in this channel, because then you're going to have three players plus that central midfielder who's obviously in that kind of position. It was like there was nothing really going on too much. And obviously when there's no other movement from these other players, so for example, you'll probably notice with a PSG, for example, they put double the players on the other side. So they might have Doué and Kvaratskhelia both on the same side, with also the left back as an example, or the right back, whichever side they go on. But then what then happens is the opposite player. So for example, if they got it on the left-hand side, Hakimi, he would then be someone who, kind of stays out wide there to almost fill in that gap as the winger, so that the right back from the opposition has this to obviously, think about. And then obviously once that happens, you've got another player who's going to be able to come into these positions here. And then obviously you've got your striker who's going to almost just run that kind of channel to be able to help out in, whichever kind of which way. But the players, again, and something I always keep stressing, because they're in for Liverpool, the way I look at it is, one, that obviously, yes, we know the ball moves too slow and etc. Cool. But it's almost like players are so far away from each other anyway. I don't really understand how you feel that that's going to, then we really do have to we're going to really have to start playing these long balls and, hoping for the best. And yeah, mate, we don't have a Trent. If you're not going to put Szoboszlai in that position, we don't have a Trent. So if you don't have a Trent to be able to kind of release that pressure, release that kind of valve, I don't really understand what you're going to then do with someone like a Frimpong. If, of course, he's slotting in, at right back, at right wing. It's difficult because in the Premier League, him playing as a right winger, he's not technically proficient in that kind of way. Again, he's more about the pace, which is absolutely fine if you're going to utilize said pace. But when you don't utilize that kind of pace, then what do you do with someone like him? Yes, he doesn't mind, of course, going down into these kind of areas here, for example. And then obviously he's getting himself to the byline. But as we've seen with Liverpool, it seems weird. Liverpool will be in these kind of positions, right? So you got the defense here, blah blah blah. Liverpool might be in these kind of areas where, say, someone like Frimpong, he's got the ball here, right? But for some weird reason, we've got no one else really in the box at all trying to attack that threat. Everyone kind of seems like here. Then what will then happen is someone obviously will come in this kind of angle here, and then these guys are all here, and then he comes, or he's kind of just chilling here, really and truly. He's not making any runs, whoever that left winger is, whether it be Rio or Gakpo, they're not making intelligent runs anyway, kind of thing. The striker is on the edge of the box looking for what, I have no idea, because he's just going to do this, stand on the edge of the box, then kind of maybe move here, but he's not moving to make that run or to make this run, in behind the actual defense. Or if Frimpong is able to get that ball into the box, he's not making those kind of runs to be able to get in front of the defender. So again, I'm kind of like, these roles, as we know, as with football, every role is impacting someone else's role. Whatever you're going to do is going to impact potentially what I can do. So if I don't have movement, if I don't have rotation, if I don't have passing options or anything like that, unfortunately, all it ends up happening is we go back, then he goes back, he might drop back in a little bit. He's obviously there. Let's say he's here. Yeah, okay, cool. We're going to go into, this player here, but then obviously he's covered, and then obviously he's covered, and then obviously he's come back, and sometimes the right mid. And then all of a sudden, Liverpool are then faced with just this. Now, you try and get through that. And obviously that's Liverpool's biggest Achilles heel anyway. You try to get through this. You're not going anywhere. And when you're moving the ball at snail's pace, you're going here, you're going back here. Then Frimpong might, obviously doesn't want to get offside, so he might come back a little bit if he's on obviously the right wing position, or even if it's Salah, they do the exact same thing. But he needs to be able to have that opportunity to be able to run in behind, because he can find that. So he's got the pace. He's definitely got the pace. You know what I'm saying? The pace is definitely not an issue. It's just we're not utilizing it in any such way. Now, as I said, Liverpool are going to be getting in a new manager. Could that potentially change things? Will we then see a different kind of Frimpong? Will we use him at right back? Will we just use him as a right winger? Obviously, finances and things are obviously going to be taken into account, but he is definitely one player I look at and just think, I really don't know. I really, really don't know. A lot of you fans, you would like to have another right back. So what then happens? I mean, obviously Frimpong was only 13 million, I think it is, with the release clause. Okay, fair enough. So it's not like you're losing out in that kind of much, or that much, should I say? But yeah, it's a tricky one with him. It's a really, 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 really tricky one with him. I really don't know. Like I said, I know a lot of us would prefer to have a different type of right back in that kind of position, especially because Conor Bradley, isn't keeping himself fit, and he looks like he might be injured for a prolonged period of time. Will that potentially change the thinking of whoever this new manager is at the time of this video? So it's a lot to think about. It's a lot to kind of think about. So, but I would like to know what you guys think in the comment section in regards to Frimpong. How do you see it? How do you see him? Where do you want to see him on the pitch? If you even want to see, him on the pitch. Let me know, man. Yeah, your thoughts in the comment sections. Stay blessed, same energy, and I'll catch you guys soon.